Oh my goodness. I didn't know what to expect going into last night. I had low expectations for mostly everybody involved. But if you come out of last night thinking that debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump was anything but an absolute loser for Joe Biden, you are kidding yourself. Or you're Jill Biden, I suppose, as she was leading cheers for Joe after the event last night.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the answers.
You knew all the answers. You knew, Joe.
And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do?
Lie! I mean,
Yes.
was that a kindergarten rally after the event last night? My goodness. I don't know how you get up there if you're Jill and say what she just said with a straight face. I mean, this is not about my personal beliefs. This is about watching with your own two eyes and listening with your own two ears on what you heard from the sitting president of the United States last night. Remember, the incumbency carries some power to it, carries some weight to it. People are looking at you and they're saying, you've been the guy for 4 years. Tell us why you deserve 4 more. Now, it's unique because Donald Trump was in office 4 years prior to that, but still, you are being looked at by the American people. And it's your job to sell them on 4 more years of you. And Joe Biden could not do it. The plan for Joe Biden last night was to get under Donald Trump's skin, was to make Donald Trump the unhinged lunatic that he has been portrayed by for many for the better part of 8 years. And by the way, I'll say this much. Sometimes Donald Trump has given them the ability to call him the unhinged lunatic. But ever since it came out from CNN that they were going to cut microphones and there was going to be no audience, I said, this is good for Donald Trump. And it was good for Donald Trump last night. Not only was Joe Biden a shell of the man that he has been in the past, and he was never the sharpest tool in the shed, but Donald Trump was not the unhinged maniac that Joe Biden wanted him to be. He just wasn't. And part of that is because there was no audience for Donald Trump to feed off of, which I thought was going to be good for him. And the mic cutting thing also worked out beautifully for Donald Trump. Team Biden wanted those mics to be cut. But in hindsight, they should not have wanted that, for the reasons that we've talked about for the last couple of weeks on this show. Donald Trump played it knowing that if he was the guy talking into a microphone that wasn't working, he was going to look like a weirdo and he was going to look like an insane person. And as a result, knowing that he was not going to be heard when his microphone was not on, he just stood there. He was much more measured, certainly than he was in the first debate of 2020, 4 years ago now. But he was arguably more measured than he's been in any presidential debate of his life. Now, is there still a lot of hyperbole with Donald Trump? The best this, the greatest that, sure. But you know what? That's who he is. Do I wish he had a few more facts in his back pocket and in the arsenal? No doubt about it, right? But you've seen this show before, and you know how it's going to go. I didn't think Donald Trump was going to come in as the guy who is going to be dishing out facts left and right. You expect the hyperbole. You know how he is. It was really more for Trump about demeanor and character and approach. And if you're a Donald Trump fan, you can't come away from last night without giving the guy an A+ in terms of how he conducted himself, especially when you compare it to some of the debate performances from 4 years ago when he just wouldn't stop talking. And it was a terrible look for him at the time. Last night, he just let that thing unfold. And for the most part, he did not take Joe Biden's bait. But the story is Joe Biden. The story is a guy who is just not capable of doing the job anymore. You cannot watch last night. I don't care if you agree with every one of his policies. You cannot watch last night and come away saying to yourself, I am comfortable and I'm sleeping well at night knowing that that guy is the leader of the free world. You would not hire that guy to be a Walmart greeter. You wouldn't. And I'm not insulting Walmart greeters. I'm just saying you wouldn't hire him to be a Walmart greeter right now. And it was about 11, 12 minutes into the debate when Joe Biden's brain just froze.
Making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. The border, all he had to do was leave it. All he had to do was leave it.
That was the moment last night when things started rapidly going downhill for Joe Biden. I mean, it was rough before then. I couldn't believe how bad his voice sounded. I mean, I thought he was going to be State of the Union Joe. I thought they were going to goose him up on whatever, worked at the State of the Union. And clearly either it didn't work, the dose wasn't enough, or, he's at the point where they can't goose him up enough, John Anthony.
Maybe a little too much practice.
Maybe.
I was thinking. I was like,
Maybe too much practice. I don't know. But I was blown away with how bad he sounded. Now, the campaign has since said last night that he was dealing with a cold. Okay. We all deal with colds. We all get colds. Get a little stuffy. I had a cold earlier this week I got from the girls. Now, I know I'm less than half of his age, but still, you get the point. Having a cold should not make you comatose. Having a cold should not make you be unable to speak about what you've done as president for the better part of 4 years. And the other thing that was very telling for Joe Biden, and this was obviously part of their plan, it was simply to talk about Donald Trump, talk about things like Charlottesville and Stormy Daniels. And when, it's one thing if you're challenging the incumbent to take that approach, but when you're the guy with the record, when you're the guy in the White House, and your approach is to talk about things, by the way, debunked lies about Charlottesville from 7 years ago now, when that's what you're going back to, that is an incredible sign of weakness for Joe Biden. He sounded weak. He looked weak. And that's the thing, too. I had some people texting me last night saying, well, Biden's bar was so low, he more or less met it. First off, I don't think he did. And on top of that, the facial expressions were as damaging as anything. Not just, some of the examples that we'll play this morning of him falling over himself and having those senior moments, but the guy literally looked like he was catching flies at the nursing home. He would kind of stare off into the distance. His mouth was like half open. You wouldn't really see his teeth. It literally looked like a senior living facility commercial. When he walks on stage, I'm looking at that right now on the TV in front of me. It's not even all that impressive of a walk. It's more of a stroll. The legs don't lift up. Everything about it. It's not just what was said. It's about what you feel when you're watching the TV. And Kate said to me last night as the thing was wrapping up, he looks like my late grandpa, who died, 2.5 years ago now. And towards the end, he would just, forget things. He was in his late 80s. And, he wasn't speaking all that well, and he was looking like he had lost a bunch of weight, and it just everything about it. And for most Americans who aren't in the weeds on the politics, they're going to look at that last night and say, I can't vote for that. I just can't. And afterwards, CNN, MSNBC, they were in full meltdown mode. It's not just, what I'm saying the morning after, what many of you are sensing the morning after. It's also what they were saying on networks that theoretically would have been as supportive of this guy as they possibly could be. And they could not get themselves to do it. 913-408-7957 is our studio line and our text line here on KCMO. Pete, Trump should not spike the football today or ever. Focus on what he will do for America. The fact that Biden is no longer capable is settled. It did feel like it got settled last night. That's a great text to share with you to kick it off here on 95.7 FM. And we will get to you, your calls, your texts, your reaction, because obviously that is going to be the thing that is getting all the attention now through early next week. And Bill O'Reilly is going to be here at 8:35 this morning. So set that alarm for 8:35 when Bill O'Reilly joins us on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We were watching history last night. I know it's cliche, but we were. Because now the sharks are circling, the questions are coming. What is next for Joe Biden after that performance? I mentioned all week that there is a scenario here where if it's so ugly for Joe Biden, he gets yanked. He gets the boot. Or they basically try to force him out as the nominee, and that's not what Donald Trump should want. Donald Trump wants and frankly needs Joe Biden. And here are the headlines. I just shared this on my Facebook page. These are the headlines from some of the opinion writers at the New York Times this morning, all dropping in the last few minutes. Thomas Friedman, President Biden is my friend. He must bow out of the race. Patrick Healy, I'm hearing high anxiety from Democrats over Joe Biden's debate performance. Nicholas Kristof, President Biden, it's time to drop out. Frank Bruni, Biden cannot go on like this.
Van Jones was about to cry last night.
Van Jones, I heard that as well. Van Jones.
I just want to speak from my heart. I love that guy. That's a good man. He loves his country. He's doing the best that he can. But he had a test to meet tonight to restore confidence of the country and of the base, and he failed to do that. And I think there's a lot of people who are going to want to see him consider taking a different course now. We're still far from our convention, and there is time for this party to figure out a different way forward if he will allow us to do that. But that was not what we needed from Joe Biden, and it's personally painful for a lot of people. It's not just panic, it's pain of what we saw tonight.
That's Van Jones on CNN last night. Now, I would argue the pain of the American people the last 3.5 years has been much more than, Van Jones nearly coming to tears talking about Joe Biden's pain. Okay? But the fact that you heard that from his greatest allies in media last night tells you all you need to know about what they thought of his performance. And it's not just what he said. It's just how he looked, and it was delivery. Oftentimes in these debates, nobody remembers what you say. They remember how you say it, how you come across, and what you look like. And if you want to say that Joe Biden met the very low expectations on what he actually said, I suppose you can make the argument of that. I wouldn't agree with it, but you could make the argument. But the way he sounded, weak, feeble, confused, the way he looked when Trump was speaking, staring into outer space, his mouth half open, catching flies. It was painful to watch. Painful. 913-408-7957. David is in Overland Park. David, good morning, buddy. What's going on?
Yeah, good morning, Pete. One thing that I kind of came to mind is Donald Trump had a pretty good tan this time. It wasn't orange, and I could see him taking his suit off and going on a cruise and having a good time on a cruise ship. Joe Biden looked like he had his makeup done by an undertaker, and there's just no way around it. Biden just looked horrible.
Dave, I'm glad you brought that up, David. I thought the same thing. I thought Trump wasn't overly orange, which is good for him, And then on top of that, Joe, it looked like somebody was trying to make Joe out to be a guy who was already in a coffin. I couldn't believe how pale he looked. You got to give him a little color.
And if you had to choose one of those guys to fly you from here to Topeka, and they were both pilots, would you choose Joe Biden or would you choose Donald Trump? If they were both pilots, it's obvious. And who do we really want to run our country? It should be obvious to people.
It should be obvious. You're right, David. It should be obvious. Thanks, man. It should be obvious that even if you can't stand Donald Trump and don't like his policies, he's got it all there. Now, he still has the Trump hyperbole, and that's never going to change. But he's got it all there. For Joe Biden, you can't sit there and tell me. You just can't sit there and tell me when you watch the guy that you feel confident and comfortable with him being the leader of the free world. What do you think our enemies around the world were thinking last night watching that? I mean, I'd be down for a second debate, but I'd be fearful that, our enemies around the world would watch it. That was something else I was thinking about last night. Like, as someone who's just an American and cares for the country, Joe Biden, no matter what, is going to be in the White House, barring something unforeseen, until January of next year. I don't know if the country can afford another 6 months. 913-408-7957. Paul's in Kansas City. Hey, Paul, good morning.
Hey, Pete, I just want to comment. Sinwar, the Hamas leader down the tunnel of Rafah, watched that last night. He's not coming to the table. Xi in China, Putin in Moscow. This is a national security issue. No more debates. We can't have Joe Biden until November ever really be seen by our adversaries. That was scary last night watching that. I'm thinking, okay, Putin, Hamas, these guys are looking at this saying, we're not cutting any deals with the U.S. So this guy can't do it. So no more debates. It's over. Just let Joe Biden ride it out or whatever the Democrats want to do. But that was scary from a national security perspective, in my opinion.
If there's a short-term ramification, Paul, to all this, thank you, it is the concerns every American should have on national security. Because there is no way that the worst actors on the planet are watching that last night and saying, I better come to the table. If nothing else, listen, you can speculate, and this is more of a next week conversation, but since you brought it up there, Paul, you can speculate and have legitimate concerns that China may very well start pressuring Taiwan a little bit more, knowing that now is an opportunity to get a weak and feeble Joe Biden to the table, because they're now looking at it saying Trump's going to get back into the White House. So if we want to try to get a deal out of the United States over Taiwan, now is our opportunity to do it with this guy. And we've only got a few months left. So you could see some of those pressure tactics around the world come up, like China with Taiwan, because they're seeing the writing on the wall and saying, we've only got 6 more months of this guy. So we better make our move now and try to get this guy to the negotiating table, knowing full well we got a better chance to get what we want out of him than Donald Trump being back in the office. 913-408-7957. Bill O'Reilly at 8:30. Set the alarm 2 hours from now on KCMO 95.7 FM, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. We have much more from last night's debate, which aired right here on KCMO 95.7 FM. Of course, we're streaming all morning long on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Joe Biden did try to get under Donald Trump's skin on some things, but to Trump's credit, it didn't work. We'll play it next. What a night it was. And you heard it here on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. If you're a Donald Trump supporter and a Donald Trump fan, we talked about this a lot the last couple of days. What Donald Trump had to do is not allow Joe Biden to get under his skin. And Donald Trump handled that very well last night. There were multiple occasions, and it took probably 20, 30 minutes to get there for Joe Biden to start going down the road of, Donald Trump accusations on his character. He brought up, of course, Stormy Daniels. He brought up the suckers and losers comments that were allegedly made when Donald Trump was in Europe, when he was president, saying, the guys who died in World War II were suckers and losers, and that's why he wasn't going to go to their grave sites. All these crazy things that were alleged to have happened during Donald Trump's time in office. And you knew that Joe Biden was going to break him out. He had no choice. Joe Biden cannot run for re-election based on his track record and what he's done. So what he has to do is make it evident to the American people that they are voting for a guy in Donald Trump who they should not like. I'm laughing here because I'm just looking at this ad on TV And I don't know who's put it together, if it's a PAC or if it's the Trump campaign. Oh, it's the Make America Great Again Inc. group, which I guess is a PAC, MAGA PAC. And they have the video of Biden standing on the White House lawn a few weeks ago when it looked like he was like soiling himself or something. They used that in a campaign ad. It was pretty funny. But that being said, he couldn't get under his skin, and Trump really didn't take the bait, which once again ties back to what I said for the last couple of weeks, which is that Donald Trump is better off with no audience and when the mic can be cut on him. Knowing going into it, the mic can be cut on him.
World War I cemetery he refused to go to. He was standing with his 4-star general, and he told me, he said, I don't want to go in there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser.
President Trump?
First of all, that was a made-up quote, suckers and losers. They made it up. It was in a third-rate magazine that's failing, like many of these magazines. He made that up. He put it in commercials. We've notified him. We had 19 people that said I didn't say it. And think of this. Who would say I'm at a cemetery or I'm talking about our veterans? Because nobody's taken better care. I'm so glad this came up, and he brought it up. There's nobody that's taken better care of our soldiers than I have. To think that I would, in front of generals and others, say suckers and losers. We have 19 people that said it was never said by me. It was made up by him, just like Russia was made up, just like the 51 intelligence agents are made up, just like the new thing with the 16 economists are talking. It's the same thing. 51 intelligence agents said that the laptop was Russia disinformation. It wasn't. That came from his son, Hunter. It wasn't Russia disinformation. He made up the suckers and losers, so he should apologize to me right now.
He should have. I demand an apology right now. But he responded, and he fired back, and he's right. I think that whole point, too, of like, whatever you think of Trump, who in their right mind would say to generals around him in Europe, yeah, these guys that died in war are a bunch of suckers and losers. The fact that we're even talking about that story from half a decade ago or more now tells you all you need to know about what Joe Biden's approach was. And it was basically to try to remind the American people, you may not like me and my policies, but don't forget, you really don't like this guy. And Trump responded in a way that was fair, and then he weaved it in, by the way, to some of the other lies that have been told about him, his accusations, his campaign over the years. Now, I wish he took the Hunter Biden story and portrayed it and explained it a little bit better. The diehard political person will understand what he was talking about. But for those who don't remember, you did have in October of 2020, more than 50 former senior intelligence officials signing this letter saying they believed emails belonging to Hunter Biden had all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. They signed it a couple of weeks before the election regarding Hunter Biden's emails and business dealings, and it basically was then used by Joe Biden to say, see, all these guys who are former high-level intelligence officials in the country, they all think that this is nothing more than Donald Trump being used by the Russians to spew lies about me, my family, and my son. And that was not true. So I think explaining that stuff, and listen, I understand that when it comes to expanding intellectually on deep ideas may not always be Donald Trump's forte, but I thought he had an opportunity there to go into that a little bit more. But either way, he weaved those things together pretty well. And he was right to weave those things together pretty well. 913-4087-95.7. Let's go to Russell. He's in Mission. Hey, Russell, good morning. Russell, what's up, buddy?
Hello.
Hey, what's happening there, Big Russ? So you got a Biden moment on me. Go ahead, buddy.
Okay. All I wanted to say was this, was that Jake Tapper, and I lost count at 4, right from the beginning, came in to save Joe when he saw him driving off the cliff. Tapper would come in and go, okay, Joe, that's it. Mr. Trump, what do you have to say? Did you notice that?
There were one or two of those, but I will say I thought the moderators overall did a very good job last night. There were a couple of those moments, Russ, I will admit, But there were also a couple of times when Joe Biden would answer a question and Jake Tapper or Dana Bash would say, okay, Mr. President, you still have 89 seconds. What else do you want to say? So they did throw it back in his court, and he was completely confused when that happened.
Right. And I agree that I was surprised by Tapper because he was soft. He went soft on him. I thought he was going to come out throwing hand grenades.
No, I talk about people I had low expectations for. Thank you, Russ. I thought that they actually did a pretty damn good job. Now, the biggest thing I would critique is probably the order of questions. Like, they started off with the economy and inflation. Great, A+ work. Then they go to abortion. And, like, is that issue number 2? No, but they had to, get something into Joe's wheelhouse. And I'll get to how Trump handled the abortion thing coming up this morning on KCMO, which I thought he actually got out of there alive pretty well. But anyway, I thought the moderators did pretty well. I mean, they let both these guys talk. I didn't feel like they were cutting off Trump's mic unfairly or anything like that. I was very pleased with the debate moderators. But for CNN, CNN allowed everybody to carry the debate last night. Every network could carry it. We could carry it. And for CNN, I think they were trying to basically reintroduce themselves to the American people and come off like a somewhat balanced news network that, of course, they were perceived as really up until the Trump years when Jeff Zucker took it off the cliff. So for them, it was a good idea to come off unbiased and try to win over the American people as just a basic run-of-the-mill news network. Now, do I think people are going to start flooding CNN? No, I don't. But it was a smart move on their part to let everybody carry the network, get all the publicity from tens of millions of people, and just for the most part, play that thing down the middle. 913-408-7957. Let's go to Lee Summit. Charles, what's up?
How you doing? Yeah, I just, after listening to it, and then the comments afterwards, when I was listening to different critiques of it, where the media just couldn't say anything other than Trump was delusional and lying. And I guess what bothers me the most is the fact that it just exposed Joe's senility. I mean, I'm dealing with a senile parent, and if you deal with that, you can see it in Joe. But the part that's just insulting is that the media tries to pass it off like this is normal. And for the last 4 years, they've known this, but they're still trying to sell us the bad bill of goods.
That is, listen, that's something well said, Charles, the media is going to have to account for. I mean, they've got to explain why they tried to convince us for the last several months that Joe Biden's doing great. Everything's going well. Cheap fakes, deep fakes, it's all a bunch of lies. You saw it with your own 2 eyes last night. Sherry in Overland Park. Hi, Sherry.
Hey, if anybody's worried about what our enemies saw last night and that the jig is up, I don't know where you've been the last 4 years because the world's on fire. Since day one when he opened the border, they've known Joe's playbook better than half of America, and the emperor has no clothes. There's no new story to them. All I can say is Joe is not going to be the candidate. I've predicted that for over 2 years, and I can't even say let's go Brandon anymore because I feel so sorry for Joe. Jill should be ashamed. I don't know what's in it for her, but she should be ashamed. So let's go. Well, I can't say it anymore. I feel so bad for Biden, but watch out for Michelle Obama. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thank you very much there, Sherry. Appreciate that. Listen, I think a lot of people are feeling like you. What's in it for her? I don't know. Politics, ego, and power do weird things to people. That's the only conclusion I can come to. 913-408-7957. It's 645. Is Joe going to be the guy? Bill O'Reilly has questioned that for the better part of a year and a half now. Bill is going to be here in less than 2 hours at 8:30 to react to last night and what he saw on this debate stage. We are getting your reaction as well here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We're streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Something one caller just said, it was Charles and Lee Summit. The media has to account for how they've handled this. I want to play some of what you heard from the media in recent weeks and then try to square that with what you saw with your own 2 eyes last night. We'll do it next. You've been told by so many in media that, Joe Biden's doing great. And if you question any of the issues, if you question the well-being, the stability of Joe Biden, well, you're dealing with cheap fakes or deep fakes or, you're just buying into MAGA lies or whatever you want to call it. Well, you saw the unedited version with your own two eyes last night. And that is why in hindsight, and hindsight is always 20/20, but in hindsight, Joe Biden did not benefit at all from getting on that debate stage last night. It could go down as one of the biggest mistakes in modern American political presidential history. Because remember, Joe Biden could have easily weaseled his way out of debates by saying, I don't debate convicted felons. I won't justify somebody who's a convicted felon on a debate stage. But they thought if we set the terms, if we set the guidelines and the guardrails, and we set the TV networks, Trump will either not accept them or we will have the edge when we get up there and the American people will see Donald Trump for who he is. And Trump will eventually blow himself up. And yeah, that's entirely possible. There's still 5 months left, but it didn't happen last night. And ask yourself why, it was just in mid-March that some of the great Biden media allies like Joe Scarborough were trying to convince you that what you had seen with your own two eyes in recent months was not reality.
I think he's better than he's ever been. Intellectually, analytically, because he's been around for 50 years. And, I don't know if people know this or not, Biden used to be a hothead. Sometimes that Irishman would get in front of the reasoning. Sometimes he would say things he didn't want to say. This is, and I don't really, I don't really care. Start your tape right now because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it.
That was Joe Scarborough in mid-March. And F you, he says, if you don't believe it. Well, F you, Joe Scarborough, for lying to your audience and lying to the American people, claiming that Joe Biden's the best he's ever been intellectually. Joe Biden has never been the poster child for anything intellectual. But if that was it last night, well, man, we're even more screwed than I thought. 913-408-7957. Mary's in Kansas City. Hi, Mary. Good morning. You're on KCMO.
Good morning. First-time caller. Love your show.
Thank you, Mary.
Hey, I just wanted to say my dad died with Alzheimer's, dementia, somewhere on the spectrum a year and a half ago. And I just see so many similarities in President Biden that I feel like his wife should protect him. It robs you of your dignity. And I feel like if she really loved and respected him, she would not put him in this kind of a situation. And I wish instead that she'd use this opportunity as a platform to get help for people with Alzheimer's and dementia or any kind of, aging mental struggles.
Mm-hmm. That would be admirable if Joe Biden did that, Mary. But, there is nothing to suggest, it's sad to say, that she is looking at taking that road. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's, the power, the ego that's getting to her. I don't know. I can't explain it because there's no way you can come out of that thing last night and feel like he's got it all there. You just can't come out of that last night feeling that way.
Right. And I just feel most disappointed in her.
Yeah.
I just feel like if she truly loved and respected him, she'd do what was best for him. That's how I feel.
That's well said, Mary.
Thanks for taking my call.
Well said, and thanks for being here. Don't be a stranger. That is Mary in Kansas City on KCMO 95.7. You wonder too, through what Mary just said there, voters and many of you who have dealt with aging parents, like Mary just said, dealt with a parent who suffered in the final years of their life with issues like that. How much of a turnoff is that for just many voters who are waking up today and feeling like Mary, right now. And Jill Biden, not only did she, and is there no evidence to suggest she is going to go down that road, but this is how I started the show with Jill Biden after the debate last night with Joe Biden at a little rally.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do?
Why?
Yes.
And Joe looks totally confused in that clip, which I'll share on my X page at Pete Mundo. I mean, that's like how I talked to Claire after she lost a soccer game 15-2 this year.
She needed to help him off the stage. I don't know if you saw that as well.
I did see that. Yeah, that was a bad look as well. I mean, there's a lot to be concerned about just for the next 6-7 months of the country, because he's going to be there for at least that long. Bill O'Reilly, 8:30. Do not miss that conversation. Stream it on the KCMO Talk Radio app if you're in the office by then. Listen on 95.7 FM. Kansas made an appearance early in the debate last night. We'll get to that and you coming up. I really thought two of the stars last night, never thought I'd say it, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash did a pretty damn good job last night. They started off on inflation. They started off on the economy. They let Trump talk. They weren't unnecessarily cutting off his mic. I thought there were moments when they probably favored Joe a little bit more, but they also put Joe on the hot seat a couple of times when they were like, dude, you still got 89 seconds left in your answer. What do you want to say? And that didn't go well for him. If there's a criticism, it's the order of topic choice. So they start off with the economy. They start off with inflation. That was a no-brainer, right? Then issue 2, of course, they get to abortion. And this was going to be an opportunity potentially for Donald Trump to not go off the rails, but certainly to struggle. I mean, that's one issue. Trump, all the polling suggests he wins on the economy, he wins on inflation, he wins on immigration. Where he struggles is on the issue of abortion. But I thought that Donald Trump last night, on his answer with abortion, handled it very well. Now, you may not agree with his answer on abortion. If you're a pro-lifer, there are certainly issues that I disagree with him on when it comes to abortion. But politically speaking, he answered this exactly how he needed to answer this right now. And he even dropped a mention of what happened here in Kansas almost 2 years ago now. So he got out of this one alive. It was not an issue that I thought set him back in a meaningful way. And he made it very clear that this issue, as far as he sees it, is not a federal issue anymore.
As president, would you block abortion medication?
First of all, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion bill, and I agree with their decision to have done that, and I will not block it. And if you look at this whole question that you're asking, complex but not really complex. 51 years ago, you had Roe v. Wade, and everybody wanted to get it back to the states. Everybody, without exception. Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives. Everybody wanted it back. Religious leaders. And what I did is I put 3 great Supreme Court justices on the court, and they happened to vote in favor of killing Roe v. Wade and moving it back to the states. This is something that everybody wanted. Now, 10 years ago or so, they started talking about how many weeks and how many this, getting into other things. But every legal scholar throughout the world, the most respected, wanted it brought back to the states. I did that. Now the states are working it out. If you look at Ohio, it was a decision that was an end result that was a little bit more liberal than you would have thought. Kansas, I would say the same thing. Texas is different. Florida is different. But they're all making their own decisions right now. And right now, the states control it. That's the vote of the people. Like Ronald Reagan, I believe in the exceptions. I am a person that believes. And frankly, I think it's important to believe in the exceptions. Some people, you have to follow your heart. Some people don't believe in that. But I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. I think it's very important. Some people don't. Follow your heart. But you have to get elected also. And because that has to do with other things. You got to get elected. The problem they have is they're radical because they will.
So then he goes on to bring up, Democrats are radical on the issue of abortion. And, for the most part, there was obviously a lot of Trump hyperbole in there, as there are in many of his answers. Every legal scholar said, it's like, well, probably not, but whatever. He goes on to bring up then, of course, the radical nature of the Democratic Party on that issue. And he's absolutely right to bring that up. I wish he would have weaved in the point that, hey, in Europe, they are actually more conservative on the abortion issue than the Democratic Party is in America. I mean, there's many who just think there should be no limits. In many European countries, they have limits at many cases 12 weeks in many European countries that, generally speaking, are more liberal than America. But on that issue, they realize that, it's disgusting when you're advocating for some of these late-term abortions. But either way, he brings up Kansas there, and he brings up the point that needed to be said. This is not a federal issue anymore. We should not be talking about this in presidential debates. This is now a state issue. And he mentions Kansas, where, of course, Value Them Both was on the ballot 2 years ago and got its clock cleaned by nearly 20 points, which, as he notes, was probably a more liberal outcome than, many would imagine. Now, for those of you that maybe don't like Donald Trump's approach on this and want to see federal legislation, well, let's just worry about, limiting abortions as much as we can in Kansas and Missouri. That should be the goal. That's how this should be perceived by pro-lifers in Kansas and Missouri. What are you doing? What are we doing to try to make it that Kansas and Missouri are not hotbeds for these abortions? And right now, Kansas is, in the region, a hotbed because of what other states around us have done and because of how Kansas voted a couple of years ago. But don't be mad at Trump for that. Don't be mad at Trump for saying, this is now in the state's hands. He got you guys and got what many of us wanted. Roe v. Wade overturned. Now, do the job on the ground in your states to try to get rid of the abortion industry as much as you can through the vote of the people. That's what's got to happen here. Let's go to the phones. Dan's in Raytown. Dan, what's happening? You're on KCMO. Good morning.
Good morning. I agree with you that the moderators did a great job last night. But my problem is they asked both candidates the same question every time. Mm-hmm. And going back to the last two elections also against Biden and Hillary, they only asked Trump if he'll accept the results of the election. They never asked the other candidates that. And they make a big deal about Trump not accepting the election results. They're taking him to court for it, in a sense. And Hillary still denies the election, but they never asked the other candidates that question, only Trump.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, Hillary still claims that, and she has said as much for years about 2016, that it was rigged by the Russians. That's a good point.
Yeah.
That was towards the end, and thank you, Dan. That was towards the end when, Trump was, I thought he answered it fine. He said, if it's a free, fair election, then absolutely. I mean, that's all I needed to say. He probably talked too much after the fact, but in the end, he just said yes. And he could have easily said yes. He probably could have said it a little bit quicker than he ended up saying yes. But all in all, he did say yes. So you give him that much. 913-408-7957. Monica is on KCMO. Hi, Monica. Good morning.
Hi. Love your show.
Thanks, Monica.
So the way that this played out, it's almost so scripted that if you can't see it, you're blind. For the longest time, the Democrat Party says Biden's fine, and then they throw him on stage, and they're like, "Oh no, this happened overnight. He's not, what we say he is." Well, what most people that can see believe is that they're going to go ahead and push him onto the ballot, and then they're going to throw him out and put whoever they want on there. That way, they don't have to go through all the hoops for their next elected candidate.
So you think they're going to try to drag him across the finish line and then replace him in a second term, or you're saying he's not going to make it to the ballot and someone else is going to be on the ballot?
I'm saying that he's going to be made on the ballot, and then like right before, they're going to take him off and they're going to throw somebody else on, because at that point they won't have to go through all of the the political nonsense that comes before the election.
I see. So you're saying he'll be the nominee. They'll nominate him at the convention next month, but then at some point in the fall, they'll swap him out.
That's what's going to happen.
Thank you, Monica. I don't know. I admit I don't know the process of how that would work. I think it's more likely at this point that they get to the convention and somebody else, becomes the nominee. But Joe and Jill have made it very clear he's not going anywhere. He's just not going anywhere. So I don't see, frankly, any way. That's why there's this big media push this morning on CNN and MSNBC to get Joe out. They're trying to pressure basically Jill Biden to pull the plug on him. But I saw nothing last night to suggest that she's got any interest in doing that or he's got any interest in doing that. And until they agree to it, he's not going anywhere. Last night was a damn good show. 913-408-7957, weaving in as much of your reaction as we can. Bert's in Polo. Bert, what's up, buddy? Go ahead, my man.
Hey, Pete, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well.
Hey, I just, how come there's not a 5-alarm fire to get this guy out of there? He's got the keys to the nukes. I mean, why aren't they doing a cognitive test or something? I just don't get it.
Yeah. Listen, there's a lot of people around him that should be having that very conversation this morning. But,
I mean,
they've gotten this far, they figure they can squeeze out another 6 months.
But could you imagine if that was Trump on that stage? They would have wheeled him out in a stretcher and took him right there to see how he was,
Yeah. Yeah, man.
I think I watched that dang debate so long, I think I got a stuttering problem now.
None of us got smarter watching that thing last night. I'll agree there, Bert.
No, but I'm just saying, man, I mean, something's got to change.
Yeah, man. Have a great weekend,
All
buddy.
right, you have
Thank
a good
you.
weekend, Pete.
Listen, I'm with you there. None of us gained brain cells last night. There's no doubt about that. Victor's in Parkville. He's next up. Hey, Vic, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Pete. I worked the overnight, so I was sleeping last night, and this is where I'm really grateful to the outstanding work by your guys who are on the Red Eye Radio that do the Midnight to 5 show. They had all sorts of sound bites and everything else, intensive discussion, calls and everything. Sometimes I even get news before my wife does. The thing is, I think Trump did great, and I think this is part of the larger plan to try to oust Biden, because now that the polls are showing the trends that are going on, the Democrats see that he can't win. But they've got a problem because the delegates are all legally declared and committed to Biden. So the only way that they can get Biden out is he has to drop out. He has to voluntarily drop out. I mean, as far as an open convention, I don't know exactly what's going to go on with that. And, the one lady earlier today was talking about bringing in Michelle. Michelle doesn't want it.
No.
Michelle's too busy living the high life up in Martha's Vineyard. Okay. Now, here's the questions. There's a couple questions. I mean, if he can't run for president, how can he serve as president? And the big question is, now what? We've all seen what he's like, including our enemies around the world. So are they going to Article 25 him? Then they got, now you've got tackle bridges. And then, if not that, what? A 7-month lockdown?
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to send in Hillary Spixer? I mean, now what I'm really curious about is, how is Larry in Prairie Village going to spend that?
I don't know. Maybe we'll hear from him if he's not, in mourning this morning. Thank you, Victor.
Well, I'm sure he'll call in at some point.
Yep. Thank you very much, buddy. I appreciate
Have a
it.
good day, sir.
We'll have to see how this all plays out. Chris in Kansas City. What's up, Chris?
Hey, Pete. How you doing, man? I'm watching the debates, and I'm thinking about Mayor Lucas and that HUD secretary job. It's just circling the bowl, man. That's it. He probably had his bags packed about it. Now he got to unpack them. But I want to share that with you because I was thinking about him in that position.
Yeah, well, Mayor Q, he was a little busy on Twitter last night. He was trying to defend his boy. Thank you very much there, Chris. And Quentin Lucas saying today, by the way, that he is heading up to Michigan in support of Joe Biden. And he ended his tweets last night, or his X posts last night about the debate. Every one of them he ended with results over bluster. Really? That's the play you're going for on this guy? Results? Results? All Joe Biden wanted to freaking talk about was Charlottesville and January 6th and all these other things. Yeah, the man of results wanted to talk about nothing but Donald Trump's, accusations, which turned out to be lies from 7 years ago. Mr. Results. My you-know-what? By the way, 6 handicap? Oh, my gosh. Can we get into that here coming up on KCMO?